Good evening all and welcome. I hope you enjoyed tonight's video because it was the winning vote by you. It does have some particularly creepy encounters, so make sure that you listen out until the very end to hear them all. Just a quick announcement to my members and patrons. I've started a new thing. I don't always get enough stories to make a whole video, or it takes a really long time, so I'm publishing them as kind of like a mini podcast. I'm calling it Mort's Minis. And for all members and patrons, you can find it on either YouTube, under the membership videos, and it's on Patreon already. So if you want to check that out, feel free to do so. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. One of my mum's friends bought an old farmhouse about a year back. They have a 3-year-old son. The kid had an imaginary friend called Kevin. He would play with his toys in his room and talk to Kevin. His parents didn't really think anything of it, considering the age of the kid. It got weird after they started listening to their son's conversations with Kevin over the baby monitor. It seemed like something a 3-year-old wouldn't really talk about. The kid was kind of goofy, so they didn't think much of it. They asked the kid about Kevin. He said Kevin is nice. He's a farmer. They figured out that because this kid loved to play with toy tractors, and they had just moved to a farmhouse, that was why. But then it got real. There was a shelf mounted on the wall of the kid's room that was about 5 feet off the floor opposite the bed. One morning, the parents go to the kid's room to find one of the stuffed animals that was on the shelf on the kid's bed. They asked him how he got the rabbit. The kid said that Kevin got it for him. A few months pass, and stuff like this happens every now and again. Nothing that couldn't be reasonably explained. Since they moved in, they had found a church in the area and got involved in a Bible study with a few other couples from their church. They decided that they would host a Bible study one day. When they were setting everything up, they gave their address to one of the couples that had lived in town for a while. When they gave their address to the older couple, the wife looked at it and said to her husband, "Hey, isn't this Kevin's old place?" Apparently a man named Kevin used to live there. He ran into some financial troubles and sold most of his land to the neighboring farm, but kept the small patch of land the house was on. He suffered from depression and had a bit of a drinking problem, and eventually hung himself in the house. Their friend from church knew Kevin, as it's a small town in Iowa and everyone knows everyone. He found a picture of Kevin and gave it to my mum's friend. The picture was of Kevin and 3 other guys that Kevin would meet with to have coffee and talk about. They showed the picture to the kid, and the kid pointed straight at Kevin without hesitation and said, "It's Kevin." They moved shortly after. My cousin had a child about 8 years ago. My great-grandmother, a very beloved woman, an all-around great person, who I called Grandma Dora, passed away while his wife was pregnant, and only about 2 weeks before she was due. This was a big deal for a few reasons. My cousin would have been the first of his generation in my mother's side of the family to have a child, therefore would have been Grandma Dora's first great-great-grandchild. 5 generations alive at the same time. It would have been pretty cool, but she passed away from a stroke, and it was very tragic. Fast forward a few years, my cousin and his wife are showing their daughter family pictures. She was around 3 to 4 at the time, and they're asking her, "Do you remember who this is?" to see if she remembers the names of any aunts or uncles, etc. They sort of skip over Grandma Dora, and she puts her hand on the picture and says, "That's Grandma Dora." My cousin said she was a bit uncomfortable, but asked, "Do you remember hearing us talk about her?" And according to him, his daughter looked him right in the eyes and says, "No, but she visits and talks to me all the time." He said he didn't sleep right for a few weeks. Good thing we're all sure if she is a ghost, she's probably the most kind and gentle ghost there is. But still, it creeped me out. My mum told me this story the other day, and it freaked me the hell out. It goes that when my older sister was little, about 3, She asked my then pregnant aunt to pick her up and hold her. My mum said she was like, "She can't pick you up, honey. She has a baby in her tummy." And then my little sister was like, "That baby is dead." My mum freaked out, but my aunt and grandma were fine and were telling my mum it was all good. She was a toddler and didn't know what she was saying. Well, lo and behold, my aunt goes to the doctor the next day for a routine pregnancy checkup, and the baby was dead. It gives me the willies just thinking about it. I have 4 sons. My eldest son is 6, and he's the one I'm curious about. Since he was very young, first learning to talk, he occasionally said things that didn't make any sense for him to know. We were on vacation with my in-laws at the beach when he was around 2.5, and he had a blast in the water with my husband and I. The next day, we got up bright and early to go back, and he adamantly refused. He kept insisting that there were alligators in the water. We tried to reason with him that alligators don't live in salt water, but he wasn't having it. Well, my husband had taken one of our twins, almost a year old, into the water and they were playing. A few moments later, a man comes running from the pier yelling at him to get out the water and for us to get away. He explained that while watching the water from the pier, he saw an alligator just underneath the water, stalking my husband from a distance. He called 911 and animal control arrived and were eventually able to locate and capture the alligator. It was 8 feet long. There had been storms during the night and it was mating season. The explanation was that he was looking for a mate and had come in through a freshwater river that runs into the sea. But how could my son have known about that hours before it happened? Another time I was outside to do yard work and he told me to not go near the bushy tree, a fig tree, because there was a rattlesnake under it. I thought it was just childhood imagination. I'm doing the yard work and I go over to the tree to see if any figs are ripe, and I heard a rattle. I looked down and I was about 3 foot away from a rattlesnake and it wasn't happy to see me. I quickly got away as to not disturb it and hope it would be on its way. He shouldn't have known it was there. Another time we were going to visit my mum and he was asleep. We hadn't told him where we were going because she had a surprise for him. We got in the car and he said, "You can't go this way to Grandma's because the bridge is out." We always went that way if my husband was driving, and the bridge had been fully operational the day before. Sure enough, we get to the bridge and it's taped off with a detour sign. There is no way he could have known about that. Word hadn't even gotten out yet, especially since my cousin is the local supervisor and he didn't tell anyone about it until after I called him. I honestly find this all a little creepy because I cannot logically explain it. When I was little, so young I don't remember it, but I had just started talking. My parents were watching something on TV. I was playing on my own, not really paying attention. My dad said something like, "Hey, look at that old record player," to which I responded, "That's not a record player, that's a gramophone." My mum asked me how I knew that, and I casually replied, "I used to have one," and went back to playing with my alphabet blocks. My parents tell me when I was a kid, I used to go to the bathroom in our new house and start laughing. They thought maybe I was playing in there or something, but when they checked on me, every time I was just staring into the bathtub, smiling and giggling like an idiot. My mum asked me finally what I was laughing at. I would say, "The lady." I would frequently go into the bathroom and stare at the same spot in the bathtub and giggle and laugh with the lady who only I could see and hear. My parents were really freaked out at this point because the old woman who lived in our house before we moved died in the bathtub. I was too young to really remember doing it myself, but my mum still gets creeped out when she talks about it. Personally, I'm a little nervous that I may start seeing the lady someday. My grandfather died last year sometime when my son was maybe a year old. We had dinner with the whole family every Friday night, so my son had seen him several times. My grandfather was a very quiet and proud man, but when he thought he was alone or unseen, he would make silly faces at my son to get him to laugh. A few months after his funeral, my son, who liked to crawl into bed with us in the middle of the night, started just laughing uncontrollably at about 2 a.m. So I get out of bed to see what's going on. I find my son sitting in the middle of the living room in the dark, laughing. "Hey buddy, what are you doing?" He just replies, "Papa, funny." I got a little nervous for some reason and went to pick him up and bring him to our room for the rest of the night. As I'm hauling him away, he says, "Bye, Papa," and blows a kiss at absolutely nothing I can see. The co-worker's 4-year-old daughter always thought that the rattling of the water pipes in the kitchen cupboards were white wolves, and the sound always frightened her. One day she was sitting at the kitchen table and said, "Mum, the white wolves aren't bad, they're our friends." Her mum encouraged the idea by saying, "Yes, the white wolves are protecting us, they are our friends." Then her daughter added in, "They're our friends, but not the man who crawls on the floor and stands by my bed." I have a 3-year-old who says some pretty strange stuff. Last night he goes, "Mummy, the very big man with the yellow eyes is looking at you." I look, there's nothing. I tell him there is no man, and he's make-believe. My son laughs. "Oh, he's hiding now." 2 minutes later, "Oh no, Mummy, you made him very mad. Now he says he'll come down to you when you're sleeping." 4 weeks ago he tells me, "I'm not going to be 4, I'm going to die, and you will put me down, down, down in the hole." I tell him that isn't true, and ask him who told him that. He gets quiet and goes, "The man told me, but I will be scared, so after 3 nights, you die too and come with me." Sheesh, as if I didn't have bad dreams already. When my son was about 3, he had an imaginary friend in his room, who he used to talk to all the time. He would tell us stories about things she would tell him, and we'd hear him chatting to her at bedtime. We thought it was pretty cute. After a few months, my son said he wasn't friends with her anymore, and we figured out he was over his phase of seeing her. So we were surprised to hear him still talking to her at night. Then he started not wanting to go to bed and having really bad dreams. At some point, we ended up asking a lot of questions about her. We assumed she was a little girl, but apparently she was 47. She lived in the wall, and he stopped being friends with her because she wanted him to call her Mummy. Her name was something like Margaret, and she wanted him to come and live in the wall with her. He had told her he didn't want to talk to her anymore, and she wouldn't go away. We eventually moved and he stopped talking to her. Funny thing is, when I was pregnant with him living in the same house, I used to have dreams about a lady sitting at a dining table in our bedroom, except it was obviously a different era, and the room was not a bedroom at the time. The lady used to knit and make me listen to her, giving me parenting advice, while her 2 20-ish-year-old sons sat at the table quietly. I wonder what it all means. When I was merely 3 years old, I underwent a critical heart surgery due to my AVSD condition. During this procedure, they momentarily stopped my heart. It's an extraordinary experience for a young child, and when I regained consciousness, I made a remarkable statement. I went with 2 children to the sky, 1 boy, 1 girl. What makes this even more intriguing is the fact that my family isn't religious, and we had never discussed matters of faith or spirituality at that point. The significance lies in the fact that my mother had suffered 2 miscarriages before giving birth to me, a girl and a boy. This occurrence raised profound questions and stirs emotions within me. Was it just a product of my young imagination, or could there be a deeper connection at play, one that transcends our ordinary understanding? As you can imagine, the event remains etched in our family's collective memory, inviting contemplation about the mysteries of life and the unexplained phenomena that occasionally crosses our path. So recently, my 3-year-old daughter has developed an intriguing belief about a phantom lady residing in our old house. It's a historic property over a century old that we moved into a few months ago and are currently renovating. The events leading up to her claims occurred last night when both she and her younger brother felt scared to enter the loft/living room area. Intrigued by her mention of the lady, I gently probed for more information. An increasingly peculiar conversation. I asked simple, unbiased questions while my daughter shared her insight. According to her, the lady in question resides within our home, wears a green dress, and is responsible for tidying up her toys. My daughter claims to have spotted her through a window, engaged in the act of picking up toys. Apparently, this lady lives upstairs in the loft/attic area. When I asked her name, my daughter responded that she couldn't reveal it due to her potential anger. However, she considers the lady to be her friend, albeit someone who doesn't particularly like me or her mum. Okay. Initially, my mind leaped to the possibility of a secret resident within our house, given the tales associated with it. To alleviate my concerns, I took my German Shepherd up to the loft. Interestingly, our cat had previously displayed an aversion to going upstairs. The search was thorough, with every nook and cranny examined, but we found no signs of entry or any presence of an unknown person. My vigilant German Shepherd didn't show any signs of agitation and failed to detect scents. Her loyalty and protectiveness are well known, as she had previously thwarted a home invasion in our house, hence why I find it hard to believe that anyone could gain her favour without detection. Later on, we stumbled upon a black and white photograph of a woman in a dress. As it turns out, she was the wife of the original builder of the house dating back to the early 1900s. We remain uncertain whether her dress was green, and my daughter didn't recognise her from the photo. Regardless, the peculiar incident seemed to subdue, although I occasionally hear unexplainable footsteps during the night. My German Shepherd has also showed unease around certain areas of the house. I am skeptic to this, and do not embrace the notion of supernatural entities. One aspect remains unexplained, however. My daughter mentioned the lady in green, urging her to accompany her to the well. Curiously, my daughter isn't even aware of what a well is. Our property spans a significant area of 11.5 acres, with 9 acres comprising of woodland. 2 acres beyond our property line is an old, partially concealed well. I managed to take a glimpse inside, but it appeared mostly filled, making it impossible to discern anything with just a flashlight. Digging around isn't feasible since it doesn't fall within our property boundaries, though I do have a photograph of it. I had an imaginary friend called Fanny when I was a little girl. She was around my age and had a red and white dress and black pigtails, and for some reason was always in the bathroom. I'd scare my mum to death when I'd scream after she'd flushed the toilet. She'd ask what was wrong, and I'd always tell her she flushed Fanny down the toilet. She finally left one day, when she surprisingly came to the grocery store with us. She never went anywhere other than my house with me, so I was excited. But as we left, I screamed again, scaring my mum, and said we had left Fanny at the store. My mum said she knew where we lived, so she'd find her way back, but she never did. During this time, my mum and little brother would always take a nap in the middle of the day. I could never sleep during the day, so I would stay awake and do whatever in my room. Every day when I was the only one awake, the toilet on the other side of the house in the game room would flush. It always frightened me. So one day I woke up my brother to witness it. He came and sat with me in the hall. It had already happened once, and it would always do so one more time, and I was hoping he would hear it. Sure enough, the toilet flushed all on its own on the other side of the house, and his eyes widened in disbelief when he heard it. I was so happy to have someone else hear it finally, and since he was with me, I had the courage to go check it out. He was terrified, but I had to at least look to see if someone else was there. No one else was, but the toilet water was moving gently, as it does after the flush, and the echo was still remaining. Looking back, it could have been Fanny. She had some weird obsession with the toilet, and it made sense that this would be her, since it was always the same time of day, when I was the only one awake to hear it. Of course, the flushing stopped after she left that day to the grocery store. I often wonder, what happened to her. When I was around 3 or 4 years old, I found myself lying next to my dad during a nap. Even though I wasn't particularly keen on napping myself, during that quiet moment, something peculiar happened. I casually turned to my dad and said, "Hey Dad, Grandpa's here." This statement caught my dad off guard, because he had never shared much about his own father, who had sadly passed away when he was quite young. I, however, seemed to possess knowledge beyond what my dad had ever disclosed, as I confidently replied, "It's Grandpa Peter, Dad. You know his name." This revelation left my father deeply intrigued and concerned. Curiosity piqued my dad, and he couldn't help but ask, "Well, if he's really here, what does he want?" Without hesitation, I responded, "He wants to make pie, Dad." The details of what followed became hazy in my memory, but my dad proceeded to recount to me how he and his dad used to make mud pies together. This recollection stirred up a mixture of emotions within him, leaving an indelible mark on his heart. That's all I can recall, apart from my vibrant imaginary friend who accompanied me during that period. My brother endured a tumultuous and emotionally draining divorce following 2 years of marriage and the birth of 2 beautiful children. The aftermath of the separation was particularly challenging, especially when an unsettling incident occurred involving my niece at her daycare. Out of the blue, she uttered these chilling words, "My mummy is dead in the woods." Understandably, the daycare staff were utterly perplexed and concerned, prompting them to immediately contact my brother. They urgently requested his presence to address the distressing revelation made by my young niece. Filled with a mixture of worry and curiosity, my brother approached her gently, seeking an explanation for such a haunting statement. With an air of innocence, my niece calmly replied, "Because I saw her there." What made this incident even more unsettling was the fact that her mother had vanished without a trace approximately a month prior to this event. She had chosen to elope with a man of questionable character, leaving behind a trail of confusion and unanswered questions. Despite our tireless efforts, we were left in the dark, clueless about her whereabouts. A year has elapsed since the eerie incident. It continues to weigh heavily on our minds. At the time, my niece was merely 4 years old, making it difficult to ascertain the true nature of her words. Could she have stumbled upon something traumatic, or was her imagination merely playing tricks on her tender mind? The uncertainty surrounding her mother's disappearance casts an eerie shadow over the incident, fueling our concerns and heightening the mystery. My family has made countless attempts to locate my brother's ex-wife, reaching out to various authorities and conducting thorough investigations. However, all our efforts have been thus proved futile, leaving us in a state of perpetual uncertainty. I had an unsettling experience with what I believe was a paranormal entity at my previous apartment. At the time, my son was just a toddler and would often talk about 2 individuals and their dog. The strange thing was I had no knowledge of who these people were. Intrigued, I decided to investigate further by reaching out to his father and childminder, but neither of them recognized the names. I even took to Facebook asking friends if they knew anything about these mysterious figures, but again, I was stonewalled. As time went on, my son's interactions with these enigmatic beings became even more peculiar. He would leave toys out, seemingly intended for the dog to play with. Initially, I dismissed it as a figment of his imagination, assuming he had picked up the names from some old-timey source and simply grew fond of them. Eventually, we moved out of that apartment, and to my surprise, my son never mentioned them again. A few years later, driven by curiosity, I decided to delve into my family history by signing up for a family heritage website. Among the various records available, I stumbled upon the 1939 register for the United Kingdom and decided to search for my old address. To my astonishment, there, listed on the census, were the exact names my son had mentioned years ago. Those same old-timey names that had perplexed me for so long. I live in a remarkable 300-year-old house that exudes a rich tapestry of history. Within its aged walls, tales of the past intertwine with the present, lending an air of mystery and intrigue to our everyday lives. One particular night stands out vividly in my memory. When I was putting my young son to bed, he was around 1.5 years old. As I left his room, I distinctly remember switching off the light, making sure he'd sleep peacefully. However, the tranquility was disrupted when I awoke in the middle of the night to find the room illuminated once again. As you can imagine, confusion washed over me as I ventured back into my son's room. Surprised, I find him joyfully bouncing up and down on his mattress, laughing wildly. With a sense of bewilderment, I ask how the light was on. He simply points towards the switch and says, "The man, the man." The inexplicable nature of the sensation left me grasping for answers, but I simply turned it off and dismissed it as an anomaly. However, the enigma continued to unfold. A month later, once again, in the depths of the night, I found myself drawn to my son's room by the ethereal glow of the light. In a state of déjà vu, I entered the space to find my son, still in his crib, pointing at the switch and uttering those haunting words. The man turned it on." A chill ran down my spine as I struggled to comprehend the presence that seemed to manifest itself through the innocent eyes of my child. As if these encounters alone were not enough, the house had more inexplicable tales to share, as on another occasion while occupied in the kitchen, I was abruptly startled by a creaking noise echoing through the corridors. Instinctively, my gaze shifted towards the staircase, only to catch a fleeting glimpse of a naked girl running up the steps. My heart raced as I followed in pursuit, hoping to unravel the mystery. Yet as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished around a corner, leaving me bewildered and yearning for answers. To this day, such occurrences continue to grace our lives sporadically. Their origins and purpose remain shrouded in the enigmatic ambience of our historic home. When I was a kid, I had an imaginary friend called Sarah. I did literally everything with her, from spoon-feeding my food to thin air as if we were eating together, to telling her we were going to be late for school. My family thought I was just doing dumb kid stuff, but one day, my sister came and asked me what my imaginary friend looked like. From what I can remember, I said she had curly hair, a long lacy dress, a ribbon headband and long socks, among other little details. My sister started freaking the hell out, and I got so scared I reflectively slapped her in the face. Turns out, she had been taking pictures with my stuffed toys in the background, and a figure of a young girl ended up in the picture somewhere. I had never seen the picture before she mentioned it, and I never told her before that what she looked like, but it matched my description perfectly. We unfortunately don't have the snap anymore, but we all remember it happened because everyone in my family still talks about it to this day. They say she showed up in a family photo once too. It's a shame I can't remember if I was genuinely playing with a girl I couldn't actually see, or if I was, like, childish bluffing. I guess I'll never know at this point. When I was very young, my parents were divorced, and unfortunately my dad committed suicide. After his passing, my mum, sister and I went to his house to gather personal belongings that we wanted to keep. This day in particular is etched vividly in my memory because as we entered the house, the living room and the front looked drastically different. There was new furniture, unfamiliar decor, and I distinctly recall seeing an Indian family engrossed in watching TV, leading me to believe that the new owners had already moved in. Several years later, I casually mentioned this incident to my mum, only to be surprised by her response. She informed me that no one was present in the house at that time, and it was completely empty. Strangely enough, a family matching the description I had given did move in shortly afterwards, despite never having met them. When I was around 10 years old, I had a sleepover at my friend's house. It was late at night, and my friend went to the bathroom. Seizing the opportunity for a good scare, I decided to hide in the hallway just outside the bathroom door. As I waited, I could hear my friend talking inside, so I curiously peeked through the crack in the door. What I saw still sends shivers down my spine. Inside the bathroom, my friend stood at the sink with her back to me, engaged in a conversation with a little girl who appeared to be our age. The girl had long brown hair and was wearing a flowing white nightgown. She stood beside my friend, also with her back to me, facing the mirror above the sink. The sight chilled me to the core, and I was overcome with a wave of unease, unsure of what to do. I quietly retreated back to my friend's bedroom. When my friend returned, I couldn't resist asking her who she'd been talking to in the bathroom. To my surprise, she seemed puzzled by my question and had no recollection of conversing with anyone. Feeling unsettled, I decided not to bring the incident up again, but it has remained etched in my memory over the years. Even now in my late 20s, I occasionally find myself pondering that same inexplicable encounter. When I was a young child, around 4 to 5 years old, I used to experience panic attacks that resolved around a perplexing thought: the idea that our existence wasn't real. I couldn't quite grasp what alternative reality I believed in, but I had an overwhelming sensation that we were merely trapped within a dream. I vividly recall waking up in the middle of the night, gripped by fear, calling out to my mother, desperate for the reassurance that our world was indeed genuine. These episodes persisted throughout my teenage years and well into my 20s, where I would frequently be overcome by panic, convinced that I had already lived through the present moment and that I was much older, or worse yet, that I had already died. It's difficult to articulate the complexities of these experiences, but I wonder if anyone else can relate to this profound confusion and anxiety I felt. Does anyone else share similar thoughts or emotions? It's a challenging phenomenon to put into words, yet finding understanding and connection would provide some solace. During my childhood, I had an imaginary friend who left a lasting impression on my memory. He was a tall, older man with a beer gut and a receding hairline and grey hair. Interestingly, my mum would often mention my fear of the man upstairs. If I ever caught sight of him, I instinctively kept my distance, feeling a sense of unease. It frustrated me that no one else could perceive his presence but me. As it turns out, a man did pass away in that very house. Reflecting on those memories, a sense of discomfort arises when I think about this imaginary companion. There was something about him that gave me unsettling vibes, as if he had a predatory nature and always sought to be close to me. It's worth mentioning that my mum shares a belief in the paranormal and believed me when I told her. We also come from a military family and were frequently located, so regrettably the choice of our living environment was beyond our control. But I'm glad when we left to finally be rid of the phantom intruder. I had an imaginary friend of the name of Jack when I was 3 years old. He was like a blank slate of human being, and at times just a massive shadow with yellow eyes. I remember he was my friend, and I would talk to him, but I don't think he ever spoke to me. When I was asked where he would sleep, I would say he was lying on the floor completely stiff, and there were times when I would see the mass and eyes move behind doors, and I would yell that he was scaring me. I don't think he would ever harm me, but it always felt to me like he was some pale imitation of a human being. Who knows what he really was? I had 2 imaginary friends when I was a kid, Birdie and Boy. Boy was not there. Birdie was 12 foot and went everywhere with me. Between 6 or 8, he just walked out the back door when I'd finished my food. He had a smell, had energy, and would have to crouch when he was inside. He was warm and felt warm and damp when he was close, and was silent. When he walked, he would have his wings slump aside his wide, thumpy body. He had overalls on, big chicken-like feet that were worn down. His eyes were small and black, beaky, and always shut. I don't know where he came from or where he went. He was always just there. As I got older, I explained to my folks that Boy was never up, but Birdie was there. Not so much a human or dog as something else. I never spoke to him. He never spoke to me. He just watched as we would take things in together. I don't find it strange or scary. I'm 30 now and miss him. I wonder if I'll see him walking one day. Maybe when I'm closer to death. Either way, I hope all's good with you, my friend. When I was 5 or 6, I was playing in the backyard and saw something move by a bush. I went to look and saw the bush move, but could not see an animal in it. As I got closer, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What I thought were branches of the bush were spider legs. The spider was about half the size of the bush, and it was shaking the bush. The bush must have been at least 4 feet wide. My first thought was that it was impossible. Spiders didn't grow that big. So I got even closer, and saw the damn legs move towards me. That was it. I went running into the house to call my parents. My dad thought I was talking about a spider the size of an adult hand, but I said no, its legs are black or brown, and it's almost as big as the bush. He and I looked, and it wasn't there anymore, just branches, and a gap in the area of the bush where I swear I saw the spider. Never saw anything like that again. I've tried looking online, but the best way I can describe it is like a Japanese crab spider, but I never had a good look at the body, just the legs. It was one hell of a disturbing memory. As a kid, I remember going with my nana and uncle to pick up my dad from work. We went to my nana's a lot, as a kid, to see him, because he and my mum broke up shortly after she had us. Well, I remember being really tired and walking up to a very desolate dirt area. We're all from Arizona, so seeing little desolate desert patches was super common, especially because they live in Avondale, which at the time was super unfinished and close to this huge reservation, so it's not uncommon for us to drive through there. It was pitch black, other than the headlights of our truck illuminating this janky fence. On the other side of the fence was my dad standing there. He sort of just pressed his body through the fence. I remember clearly what it looked like. He seemed to tense up his body and just simply press through it slowly. He just did that, and suddenly he was on the other side of the fence, and simply got into the truck. I remember asking my nana how he did that, and she told me something, but it was in Spanish and I don't quite remember the exact words. Another time at my own house, I woke up to these weird chicken toys. They were very circular stuffed animals, clearly supposed to be chickens, but they were making sounds and bouncing in place and up and down as if someone was dribbling them. I cried out loud, screaming for my mum, and hugged my sister and fell asleep again. In the morning, my mum showed us that she got new toys, and it were the same chicken toys, but when I asked her to make them bounce like they did the night before, she didn't understand what I meant, because they didn't do that. There was one final memory I have. It was when I was screaming at my cousin, because I had this Barbie that came with a dog. She picked up the dog, and I clearly watched it bark. It was plastic, but I heard it bark. And she looked at it pleased and was like, "Drop that," and I heard it bark. "Drop it." She was younger than me. I was 7 and she was 4. She ended up crying and yelling on me because my mum just got weird and quiet when I said it barked. She probably was scared because she had some crazy paranormal experiences that she didn't like talking about. I just know that she's a firm believer in all things paranormal. I have an odd story that I wish to share. I was growing up in a small city in Pennsylvania, staying at a friend's house. His parents kind of let us run amok. When we were about 10 to 12 in the alley behind his house, at dusk, and there were a few abandoned garages and houses about a block down the alley, we were walking past them when out of the second-story window crawled a gigantic cat-looking creature. It was at least 100 pounds of brown and reddish fur, pointed ears, and green piercing eyes. It stopped looking right at us and walked across the roof it was on and went back to another window. There were 4 of us that saw it. It wasn't a dog and looked nothing like any cat I've ever seen to this day. We booked it back to our friend's house and told his older brother and his friends. They made fun of us and said it was a stray dog. It definitely wasn't a stray dog. It moved very low to the ground like a cat, but it was significantly bigger than the 85-pound black Labrador I had at home. We were no more than 30 yards away from it and got a very, very good look, and I can still remember the muscle definition in its shoulders. I need some closure on what the hell that was. When I was a little kid, we had a lovable mutt called Rex, who was quite large for his breed. He was so big that I could hop on his back and pretend to ride him like a horse. He was the epitome of kindness and had the most gentle temperament. One day, something extraordinary happened while I was playing with a football near a wall, and Rex was right by my side. I had set up 2 makeshift goalposts using brooms and was attempting to score by shooting the ball through them. As I successfully kicked the ball and scored the first goal, I couldn't believe my ears. I distinctly heard Rex say "goal" in a hilarious tone, almost as if he was celebrating with me. A mixture of disbelief and joy overwhelmed me, thinking it was just a coincidence or maybe a yawn that sounded like the word, and then I continued playing. To my astonishment, as I scored another goal, Rex repeated his comical "goal" cheer, and I was absolutely beside myself with excitement and couldn't wait to share this incredible moment with my mum. Bursting with enthusiasm, I ran to tell her and excitedly relayed what had happened. However, instead of sharing in my excitement, she erupted into uncontrollable laughter. The rest of my family too found the idea of a talking dog hilarious. I found myself in a situation where no one believed me. Even though my claims were met with skepticism, I cherished that unique memory with Rex and the laughter. It brought a happiness to me. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so very much for listening. I appreciate you guys making it to the end of the video. I want to give a special and huge thank you to my members and patrons whose names are on screen. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for helping keep the channel running. You don't know how much it means to me. Thank you. And if you'd like to be on this list, just follow the links in the description. If there's a story also that you wish to share, you know you can email it to me or post it on my Reddit page. Links in the description too. That'll explain how to do so. Alright then guys, I'm going to leave things here. If you want to watch another video, you can find one on link here. Just imagine me pointing, look, it's right there. Or there. And hopefully, see you in the next one. Stay safe.